Vanakkam, this is Dr. Madhusudhanan Kalaichelvan from Semmozhi Multimedia Center by the Central Institute of Classical Tamil, discussing the story of Silappatikaram, the story of anklets by Ilangovadigal. In the previous episode, we discussed about how Ilangovadigal describes the grand urban settlement of Poompuhar, the city which is on the eastern coast of the Indian peninsula, which is in today's Tamil Nadu, of course. It is also geographically very significant because that's exactly where the mighty river Kaveri opens herself into the oceans. Having covered hundreds of kilometers of running joyfully, spreading her arms wide and open, finally reduced into a thin stream, she enters the ocean. Right at the entrance is where the city of Poompuhar is situated. And the people of Poompuhar were gearing up for their annual celebrations to Lord Indra. Indra, as the traditional Tamil system goes, was the god of agricultural lands. He was the one who brought in torrential downpour in abundance. Of course, the water was controlled, and in bountiful monsoons he assured them, and so agricultural produce was in good sum. So the people thanked Indra once in a year. The grand festival to celebrate Indra is where Ilangovadigal describes the city. He talks about the city as an idiom of wealth. It reflects how wealthy they were by the size of the houses, the tall mansions, mansions that had balconies, which the streets were all buzzing with people and activities. Chariots, which is again a reflection of wealth, were racing past up and down, and the streets were laid in such perfection. People from other parts of the world who traded with Poompuhar, with the merchants of Poompuhar, had their own quarters. They had their own mansions too. And then there were junctions, there were corners, streets, citadels, whatnot. So such a beautifully planned city had to thank Indra, who was the god of all celestials, and he was the one who assured them such wealth. So in the Chittirai star of Tamil month of Chittirai, which is mid-April to mid-May, the Chaitra Masam as it is called, the star of Chittirai. Every year, the Chittirai star in the month of Chittirai will always fall on a full moon day, full moon night, of course. So that's the Chitra Paurnami. The Paurnami Tithi of Chittirai month was what was celebrated as Indra's festival. It was in fact the concluding season of spring. Indra brings along with him a lot of joy. So there is color everywhere around. The flowers spread a lot of fragrance. The bees humming around the flowers produce good notes of music, and people, it's warm and people enjoy the weather, people enjoy the outside. So good music, and harvest had just happened, so they have enough to sell and make money. So everything is positive around. The vibes are so pleasing. And what could be better than the evening times of the spring season to spend your time with the loved ones, listening to music and enjoying good food. So it's pleasure everywhere. So the all giver Indra is celebrated, and the celebrations come to a close on the Chittirai star. So the city was gearing up for it. Every mansion was decorated. Ilangovadigal gives us such beautiful details about even what went into decorating these tall mansions. The broad verandas were decorated with precious stones, emerald and ruby, and every house, the front facade of the house, had hangings which depicted the makara, the fish, which was also a part of Indra's wealth. So the fish sign symbol decorated the entrances. It had sharp nose. He talks about how coral were used, the coral beads were used to decorate the columns, the pillars. And he also talks about the distinguished gatherings of merchants, the councillors of the kings, who were 5 in number. So there was a kind of an official setup, a group of 8 such merchants, a confederation that came in, and then the 5 councillors. So they were all greeted in the city. They were all representatives of the king. So when there is a state festival that was happening, they were significant visitors to the city. So they were called upon, they were commissioned, they were hosted by the city council. So it was a state festival that was being celebrated. And the Chola king, whose victories had no limits in any direction that they marched, had to be celebrated. So, the Chola's wealth also was reflected in the grand scale of celebrations. When all of this was happening, the young and the youthful had their own share of joy too. So, they roamed around the streets in groups. Madhavi, who had by then fallen in love so much with Kovalan, who had spent quite a few evenings in his company with lost in love for him, was gearing up for the festival too. She was getting ready to welcome Kovalan for the evening. She was dressed with such silk and jewelry. Every flower that blossomed in her garden went into adding more luster to her, adding more fragrance in the air. She was in fact compared to the tenderness of the flowers which had blossomed then. She was compared with traditional flowers for her posture, her fragileness. Everything was compared only with flowers. So, a bouquet of flowers which decorated her garden, which spread fragrance, was all over her, and she was gearing up. The cool sandal paste was applied on her. She perfumed herself with it, and as this bride ready for her first night, she was there ready to welcome Kovalan. Kovalan is described along with the other men. So, it talks about how he was roaming down the streets of Pumbuhar along with his minstrels. So, each of the young lad who was a part of his team composed songs on their own loved ones too. So, the young and energetic young boys described the beauty of their own love, and one boy says, "Are you this moon up above in the sky?" who was probably feared by Rahu, the traditional, the mythological snake, the planetary body that which chases the moon. We talk about the eclipse which is caused by Rahu and Ketu, the two the snake headed and the snake bodied gods who keep chasing the moon. So, fearing being chased upon by Rahu, did the moon just descend and land here in Pumbuhar? Was your eyes faked by fish? You seem to have a tattoo of a rabbit, which is also seen as accumulated pattern on the moon. So, he compares his lady love with moon and all the special features, the unique aspects of moon, and says, you seem to carry all of it. So, you should be a humanized version of nothing but moon. And then there is yet another guy who compares his lady love with the god of death, Yama. He says, I have always heard of Yama as this very fiery god, and so did he take up this form of a bashing girl who's so tender, so has this sweet notes as she talks. Your voice and the sweet voice can be compared with the sound and the beautiful controlled notes of the harp. So, what happened to Yama? Did he take this beautiful feminine form and land here? Because you seem to keep killing me. And then there is one more boy who compared Cupid and his attitude with the way his lady love was challenging him. So, there were these beautiful songs authored by the young lads who were roaming around the streets, and Kovalan was amidst them. This was good enough to energize him, charge him with a lot of love for Madhavi. As this was happening in one side, the city's religious parts of the festival, so the religious front of the festival was also gearing up. The drum from the temple, the sacred drum from the temple of Vajra Kottam. Kottam here is a common word that Ilangovadigal uses for representing temples. There were temples for gods, there were temples for the weapons of the gods, and there were temples for the vehicular mounts of the gods too. If you consider Indra, the primary of all the gods, the celestials who were led by Indra. So, the primary temple was for him, and when Indra has a temple, there should be a temple for Vajrayuta, the sacred weapon of Indra. Vajra, which we believe causes the thunderbolt. So, that was also enshrined. The emblem of Vajra, the Ayuda, the weapon, was also enshrined in an exclusive temple. And so, there was a temple for Kalpaka Vriksha, the celestial creeper, which is owned by Indra, which decorates his garden in Indraloka, which also has the power to grant you anything that you pray for. So, Kalpaka Vriksha was also enshrined in a temple. So was the white colored multi-tusked elephant called Airavatha, which was also an exclusive wealth owned and controlled by Indra. So, Indra had a temple for himself, the Vajrayuta, the Ayudha had a temple, Airavatha, the elephant had a temple, and so did the Kalpaka Vriksha. Each of it were enshrined in an individual temple. So, the celebrations at Indra's temple was coming to a close. So, this was the grand closure of the month-long festival. As it came to a close, Indra had to be bathed in a ceremonious way. 1008 pots, pitchers, all made of gold, was used by people from royal background to collect water right at the mouth where she enters the sea. Kaveri is all fragrant because she keeps collecting all the pollen fallen from flowers borne by trees which were at the banks of Kaveri, which are on the banks of Kaveri. So, you have Kaveri running, the banks were enriched, and so the enrichment there paved way for a lot of trees, and these trees were very fertile. So, they kept flowering all through the spring season, and the flowers were in such abundance that there were no takers for it. People could only take what they could use. So, there was more than what was needed. So, these flowers were just left in the trees, and they ripened and they started spreading their pollen all over the water. So, Kaveri had earned a lot of natural fragrance, a mix of fragrance from the pollen dust fallen from flowers all through her journey. So, all of this gets accumulated at the end of her journey. So, the water a little before Kaveri entered the ocean was so fragrant, and people collected it in 1008 pots and pitchers all made of gold, carried it on their heads and took it to the temple of Indra. A little before the sacred ablution, the drum, the sacred drum from the temple was carried on an elephant's back all through the streets, accompanied by a long parade of celestial flags, symbols, people who played different instruments. So, people on both sides of the streets watched as this festival parade was happening. So, when this was happening, this was followed by people carrying water, 1008 pots of water for the ceremonial bath of Indra. And so, that also happened at Pumbuhar. Silappatikaram time and again keeps referring to a king called Muchukunda. Muchukunda is a very ancient name, as old as Mahabharata. He finds reference there. As old as Skanda Purana, which talks about how Muchukunda was accompanied by the Navaveeras, the 9 great warriors who were helpful in Subramania's war against Surapadma. We all know about how Muruga or Subramanya waged a war against a demon king called Surapadma, and he was ably assisted by Veerabahu, who was the commander-in-chief of Muruga's army, and along with his brothers. So, they were a total of 9 brothers who had become brother-in-laws of Muchukunda. Muchukunda is identified as a monkey-faced king who ruled the Chola country. The Cholas in several occasions claim their ancestry reaching all the way up to Ikshvaku, in whose ancestry Rama comes. So, we have this shared genealogy of the Cholas with the dynasty of none but Sri Rama himself. So, the Cholas talk at length about Ayodhya and Rama and his rule and the embodiment of dharma that he was. They say we have learnt all of this dharma from our ancestors, and this long list of ancestors include none but Rama, Dasharatha, and going upwards all the way up to Ikshvaku, in who comes in the clan of Surya Deva. So, the Cholas also belong to the solar race, and in that long list of ancestry, the Cholas refer to Muchukunda Chola, who was a monkey-faced. Traditional history talks about him to have the face of a monkey. And so, he was ruling from Kaveri Pumpatnam. So, he was there, and it talks time and again about how in his able administration, he took the task of overseeing the grand celebrations, which were more a way of telling thanks for all the wealth that Indra has bestowed upon them. So, it talks about Muchukunda overseeing the celebrations too. So, the parades are happening, the flags have been hoisted up there, and the sacred drum has been taken out on the streets, and Indra is being given a ceremonial bath. It was accompanied by Vedic chants. It time and again talks about the Vedic rituals that were a part of ancient Tamil Nadu. It talks about how a Yagashala was set up in one corner. Grand fire sacrifices were being conducted, and as the offerings were being made in the fire, the celestials approved of them, accepted them, acknowledged them, and promised them with good controlled monsoons for the next cycle also. So, this was happening. And on one side, you had the Pauranikas, people who narrated stories from the Puranas, who were also keeping people engaged. So, you had Vedas, you had Vedic recitation, you had the Karma Bhaga of Veda, which includes the rituals to be performed, predominantly the fire sacrifices, as that was also happening on one corner. And then you had the Pauranikas who had mastered in narrating the Itihasas and Puranas. So, we have Vedas, we have the other Vedangas, you have Itihasas, Puranas, all of these traditions which were a part of Tamil ancestry too. These are common aspects that we share all over Bharatadesha. These are all such accumulated wealth and wisdom over centuries by great sages, which is a common wealth to every Indian, to every proud Indian. So, this was the common thread that bound India together. So, here we have an ancient text somewhere around the 6th or the 9th, anywhere between the 5th to the 9th century, believed to have been authored by then, which talks about Tamilagam, where you had the Vedas finding a prominent place in the state celebration. It talks about the Itihasas, it talks about Rama, it talks about Puranas, what not. So, the Vedic Brahmanas were celebrating in their own way, they were conducting the rituals and the yajnas were being done. And on one side you have the Pauranikas who were elaborating various Puranas. So, it was a grand state festival as it was happening. And there the young lads were also having their own good time. Festivals in other temples of the city is also recorded by Ilangovadigal. Festivals were not restricted only to the temples of Indra. There was a temple, the first in the list of gods includes Shiva. Shiva has been acknowledged as the primary gods of every region of India. All through history we have seen this. Every kingdom had bowed and built temples to Shiva. Several kings have acknowledged themselves to be practicing Shaivites too. So, here Ilangovadigal uses a beautiful name to denote the temple of Shiva. He says Pirava Yakkai Periyon. The primary god, Periyon, of all gods, he is the primary, is the one who never is born. So, Shiva is the only god who is acknowledged with this quality to have won over or who has never fallen in the vicious cycle of life and death. Life and death is for the mortals. We are born, we live through and we die. So, this cycle is for the mortals. Shiva is up above all. He is above it. He in fact commissions the mortals to fall into the cycle and helps them at some point to get out of it too. So, this cycle is for the other gods. So, Shiva is referred to not by that name, he is not referred to as Shiva, he is referred to as the one who is never born, Pirava Yakkai Periyon, the one who manifests without a birth. And then there is a temple for the six-faced god Subramanya. So, he is being worshipped too. Then there is a temple for Balarama, the elder brother of Krishna, who is the incarnation of Adisesha, the celestial snake. And then there is a temple for Nediyon, who is Mahavishnu, the tall one, because he grew as Trivikrama, he managed to measure all the three worlds with 2 feet of his. So, these are the gods who have been described. And so, celebrations in these temples were also happening, and so this was the mood in which the city was. And Kovalan and his bunch of friends were walking on the streets, each describing the beauty of their lady love, composing songs on them and singing. And Madhavi was equally happy too. Her nights were sleepless. She was engaging quite frequently with Kovalan, and so her eyes were turning red by evening. So, this was also happening on one side. It was as red as the lotus flower. And the young lads falling for women like this was in a way causing a concern to the elders of the city. The elders, merchants especially, who have amassed a lot of wealth, were worried that the next generation, the kids, the young boys of the next generation who have all been married, from whom there is some amount of responsibility that is expected, were falling for women and they were losing a lot of money. They were not multiplying wealth, which is what is expected out of them as merchants, but they were in fact spending a lot on women, and this is not a very healthy trend. In fact, they were getting married very early because in order to quench the thirst, marriage would make it even more balanced. To set up a family and help them with more responsibility was the concept too. But here, apart from being married and having their wives, these young boys were spending a lot on women of such nature. This was becoming a concern for the elderly of Pumbuhar. So, as they were worried about the changing times, we have the description of Kannagi which is brought in. As much as the eyes of Madhavi was red, Kannagi's was black. She has been waiting all through her sleepless nights. This was getting quite a challenge for her. She has been expecting Kovalan to come back at some point. But on the other hand, Kovalan seemed to have completely not just ignored her, but had probably forgotten her. He had forgotten Kannagi. She, along with women of such nature, have been having a long fight with every evening that passed. The bright days kept them engaged, but as it set, as the sun set and the evening was approaching, they were trying their best to win over the moment of loneliness. The solitude was causing a lot of chaos internally. They were not able to take the brunt and they were trying to win over it, but something seemed to be blank, and not knowing how to handle this, they were having their own tough times. Kannagi, in the company of women of similar loss, also had sleepless nights, but this did not cause her pleasure, which was exhibited by her eyes turning red. On the other hand, she was growing dark circles all over her eyes, all around her eyes. So, Ilangovadigal gets into super duper poet mode and compares the red eyes of Madhavi with those of lily and lotus, but the dark circled eyes of Kannagi with flowers that had a deep blue color in them, the Kuvalai flowers. They were very dark and tender. Kannagi's eyes was losing its luster and life. Bothered continuously, more so because it was the spring season. There is joy everywhere around, and there was color, there was fun and frolic, there was music, there was food and chit chats, happy discussions, meeting of friends, everything was there. But nothing was assured for Kannagi, for she lost the very love of her life. He doesn't seem to remember her anymore. It was quite a challenge. To her utter dismay, where is this leading her to? Not able to withstand the separation because there was joy everywhere around, but for her, she was going through a very, very tough state. What exactly did fate have for her? How did she manage to be recalled in the memories of Kovalan? Did he even recall her? How exactly fate played a very strong role in reminding Kovalan of somebody who is dutifully waiting for her, attending to whose needs was his first and foremost duty. How did he even got reminded of her and turned back in life, reached out to Kannagi? That's for the next episode. This is Dr. Madhusudhanan Kalaichelvan signing out here. Nandri, Vanakkam.